Good evening. In today's session, we will discuss a concept on the types of computers, and we will also see one of the important topic, which is the block diagram of a computer. So, if time permits, we will also go through the concept of various programming languages we have. So, in the last session, we have discussed the introduction to computers, where we have gone through the definition of computer and then the history of the computers, and then we have seen the various generations of computers we have. So, all the 5 generations what we have discussed in the previous session, they are based upon the technological advancement. So, we have different 5 generations. At present, we are in the 4th generation and we are moving towards the 5th generation, where the technology that lies behind this 5th generation is the artificial intelligence. So, that is all about the what we have discussed in the last class. So, in today's class, as I told that we are going to discuss the various types of computers. We will come across these types of computers in our daily life, but we should have some idea what purpose is, for what purpose these computers are being used, right? And the classification of these computers is based upon the computing capability. So, we have so much of high intense calculations nowadays. For example, if you take a weather monitoring system, so much of calculations you have to perform. You have to take lot of some GB of data you have to take within less time, and then you have to process it, and then you have to give the results. So, for such type of high intense calculations, you require the computers with high capabilities, computational capabilities. So, based upon the computational capability, we have divided these computers into different types. The first one what we are going to discuss is the supercomputer. You might have heard this term supercomputer, right? So, these supercomputers are used when we have calculation intensive tasks. That means, as I told that you have so much of complex applications you need to run. For example, weather forecasting or the quantum physics or some quantum mechanics or the molecular theory. All these are so much of well advanced topics which require high calculation intensive tasks. For this purpose, you cannot work on the laptops or the desktops which you have in your house. For this purpose, you have to go for a high computational capable computers, and the high computational capable computers till now we have is the supercomputers. So many countries have got into this race and they have developed their own supercomputers. The main advantage of these supercomputers is, as I told that they are going to complete the tasks within less time. For example, if they are highly calculation intensive tasks, they are going to take some more time, but if it is a simple task, there is nothing to do with the supercomputers, but these supercomputers are only utilized when you have these calculation intensive tasks. They will do it within fraction of a second. This is possible because of the ability for the computers. They have the high memory storage, they have the high processing capabilities. So, they have processors which works in a parallel processing technique by making use of the parallel processing. As I told that parallel processing, that means you are going to process the data in parallel. For example, you might have heard the term quad core computers. Quad core computer is nothing but it consists of 4 cores for a processor. So, each and every core, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3 and this is 4. Each and every computer is capable of, each and every core is capable of executing a particular instruction. So, if you have a set of instructions, what this parallel processing will do is, one set of instruction will be given to core 1, another set is given to core 2 and core 3 and then core 4, and all the instructions on these cores will be run in parallel. So 4 instructions running at the same time, which makes the execution of the particular program very faster. You can achieve the output, or you can get the output within no time. So this is the advantage of this parallel processing. But in the normal computers, we have only one core. So if you have 5 instructions, you have to give all these instructions in a sequential fashion, one after the other. So it takes a lot of time to calculate or to execute these 5 instructions. But if you consider the same thing with the parallel processing computing, or parallel processing or parallel computing, you can achieve this within very less time. So this is where the supercomputers are going to get the benefit of handling the highly calculation intensive tasks. This is all because of parallel processing, and there are so many reasons for it. As I told that you have very large memories to hold the data, and the processes that work in the supercomputers are very fast, high performance processors will be there. So all these made the supercomputers the highly very super fast computers, right? And these are very costly and they occupy very large space. This is not a simple computer where you can put it on your lap or you can put it in your home, right? They occupy very large space, entire room space it will occupy, and they are very costly. So for these reasons, these supercomputers are not yet available for the home purposes. They are being used by the government organizations, or they are being used by the Hollywood industries. For example, if you take the Hollywood industries, for the graphics design of the movies, they are going to use the supercomputers. Similarly, the military operations or weather forecasting, any company that works on huge amount of data and that require the output to be generated in very less time, they make use of these supercomputers. So for example, governments specially use this type of computer for their different calculations and heavy jobs. Similarly, there are different applications. For example, big industries or the enterprises, they make use of these huge computers to design their products. See here the size of a supercomputer, all this comes to a single supercomputer. And as I told that in most of the Hollywood movies, it is used for the animation purposes, graphics, and forecasting, weather forecasting reports worldwide can be calculated easily by making use of these supercomputers. Clear?
Yes, sir.
And the next computer which we are going to discuss is the mainframe computers. This one. Probably in the year 2000 and odd, this mainframe computers is a very hot topic where the students learnt lot of things on the mainframes and they use it to get jobs once they have the familiarity with these mainframes. So the mainframes is having the computational capability less than the supercomputer. So the second place is occupied by these mainframe computers. And this you can see here, this one diagram. Here you can see that the mainframe systems are somewhat huge in size. Maybe they will not occupy the entire room size, but they will occupy some more space which is not sufficient to put it in our house, right. So who are going to use these mainframe computers means the large organizations. They make use of these mainframes. As I told that since they are capable of holding or generating the outputs within no time, they are being used for the applications which require high intensive calculations, and whenever you require bulk data processing, these type of mainframe computers are being used, and this is being used by large companies, right. For example, you have the Apollo Pharmacy. It's a very big enterprise throughout the India, and similarly you take Reliance, or you take any air flight companies like Air India, SpiceJet. They make use of these type of mainframe computers because the microcomputers which we use in our house are not sufficient to handle the calculations or to handle the high intensive tasks. So, for this purpose these organizations they are going to buy these mainframe computers in order to have their work done in no time. So, the main advantage of these mainframe computers is they are capable of holding or hosting many operating systems. As I told that the operating system is a software, system software which is used to communicate with the hardware. Any hardware device that you have with the computer, we are going to communicate with that hardware, not directly. You have to communicate with the hardware or you have to make the hardware to work for you with the help of the softwares, and the basic system software that is used to help you or to make the hardware work is nothing but the operating system. In general, the systems what we use, for example, a desktop system or a laptop system, you are going to have only one operating system, maybe two operating system. We call it as the dual boot systems, dual boot systems. So, dual boot means we have two operating systems, one you can have the Windows and the other one you can have Linux, anything is possible, right. So, the desktop systems are capable of holding only two operating systems, but these mainframe systems are they are capable of holding more than one or two operating systems, and we can make use of these mainframes as the server also. And the applications of these computers are, as I told, that big hospitals or airline reservations companies and many other huge companies prefer mainframe because of its capability of retrieving data on a huge basis. And the next type of computer which we are going to discuss is the mini computer. Do not get confused with the macro computers. Mini computers, as the name says, that they are small in size when compared to that of the mainframes and supercomputers, but they are not being used by the individual people or the mass audience are not capable of using these mini computers. So, they have the processing capability which is lying in between the mainframes and the microcomputers. We know what these mainframes are, but we will see these microcomputers in the next discussion. But you just understand that these mini computers they have the processing capability which lies in between the mainframes and the microcomputers. So, we call these mini computers as the workstations also. So, you might be hearing this term when you go to a software industry. They say that workstations, they does not call it as the desktop system, they call it as a workstation. So, these are mini computers are also called as the workstations, and this became popular, the term mini computer became popular from the third generation of computers. So, these are also large, they take up the space that would needed for a refrigerator or to and use the transistor and core memory technologies. So, this is not the new generation of computers, this is a old generation, that is the third generation of computers. But the next topic is the macro computers, this is the fourth generation of computers where we have lot of different examples which we can quote under these microcomputers. For example, desktop systems or the laptops or PDAs, desktops, laptops, PDA means personal digital assistants. This is deprecated, this is the old technology, this is gone. So, everything is done by using these mobiles, what we have right now. So, PDAs are gone, Walkmans are gone, even the digital CD players they are gone, everything is gone, we have everything inside the mobiles. So, camera is gone, everything is present inside these mobiles. And similarly wearable computers. So, you can wear a computer, for example, You can wear a watch. Nowadays we have smart watches where we have lot of sensors that are embedded inside those smart watches. So these smart watches, what they will do is they are going to keep track of your daily activities. They keep track of your blood pressure. They keep track of your heartbeat. Everything will be monitored. So we have different wearable computers, which is not our present discussion. So these are the various examples we can give under these microcomputers. This is the present generation, 4th generation of computers. And what is the specialty of these computers is they are very small in size. That is the reason why the mass audience can make use of these computers. Microcomputers can be used by the normal people also. They are less in size, small in size. They are cheaper, which a normal person can afford, and they do not occupy the space as much as mainframes, as I told that. And the technology that is being used is the microprocessor. This is nothing but the 4th generation. And these microcomputers are supported by the input devices like the keyboard and the mouse, and they are supported by the output devices like the monitor, and you can also connect these desktop systems to a projector like that. Everything is possible, right? And these computers can fit on desks or tables. That is the reason why we call them as desktop systems, and they serve the purpose of the single user task. One person can make use of these particular microcomputers. And we have seen the examples also, like the desktops, laptops, personal digital assistants, wearable computers. Like that we can give lot of examples for these microcomputers. Clear?
Yes, sir.
And the next topic which we are going to discuss is the block diagram of digital computers. Listen here, we are going to discuss about the digital computers. The modern computers that we have in the present era comes under the category of digital computers. Why they are called as digital computers means they are going to work on the digital signals. And we told that the digital computers that are going to use in this present era, they depend on only 5 units, right? We have input unit, output unit, we have store which is called as memory, and we have mill and control. We are calling it as the CPU. These digital computers, they depend on these 4 entities. That is the reason why we call Charles Babbage as the father of computers. Why? Because these particular components has been designed in his computer, which is called as the analytical machine. Block diagram means we are going to represent a computer in the terms of blocks. We have number of blocks like this, and we will connect these blocks and we will name it. That is nothing but a block diagram. So the block diagram of a digital computer consists of only 3 parts. It consists of the input, and it consists of the output, and it consists of the processing unit. We call this as the processing unit. The definition of computer itself is it is an electronic device which takes some input, processes it, and then outputs it, a result. So the input unit is as it is, we will write. The output unit is also same, but the processing unit is again divided into 3 parts. The first one is the storage, the second one is the control unit, and the third one is arithmetic logical unit. ALU stands for, it is an acronym, it is arithmetic, L stands for logical, and U stands for unit. So when you compare this block diagram of digital computers with the Charles Babbage analytical machine, this is the input and this is the output, and this is the store, which is called the memory or storage, and this is the control unit, this is the mill, which is going to perform the arithmetic and logical operations. The entire storage, the control unit and the arithmetic and logical unit, we can call it with a simple name, which is called as the CPU, Central Processing Unit, which consists of these three parts. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Now we will see each and every part of the computer or every part of this block diagram. We will see what are the various input devices we have, we will see what are the various output devices we have, what are the categories of storage devices we have, and what is this control unit and what is this arithmetic and logical unit, everything we will discuss. That is called the block diagram of digital computers. Coming to the first part, which is the input unit. So, a computer is nothing but a device which takes the input, processes it and then gives the output. So, there should be some provision for the user to give the input to the computer. Everything that the computer requires should be provided by the user only. You have to give the data, you have to give the instructions, everything the user has to provide. Therefore, the computers need some mechanisms to receive the data or to receive the instructions from the users. Here you should understand the difference between the data and instruction. Instruction is a command that you are giving to the computer. You do this thing, you do this thing, you add two numbers, you give the sum of those two numbers, those are the instructions. Data is the entities on which you are going to perform those operations. For example, you want to perform or you want to write a program to add two integer numbers. Integers are nothing but which is represented with decimal values. Let us take the two values as 10 and 20. This 10 and 20 is referred to as the data elements, and you tell the computer to perform the sum of these two data values and give the result and or store the result in result. So, 10 plus 20 is performed and the result is stored inside this 30. 30 is stored inside this result. This is the instruction: add, sum and store it in result. These are called instructions, and 10 and 20 are called the data elements. So, anything that the computer requires should be provided by the user in terms of input. There should be a provision for the computers to accept inputs from the users. So, we have lot of input devices, not only single input device we have lot of input devices that can be connected to a computer, so that it will enable the users to provide the input to the computers. The most frequently and the most commonly used the input device is nothing but the keyboard. Whatever data you want to enter into the computer, you are going to provide it by using the keyboard. And we have so many other devices, input devices like the mouse or floppy disk. This is deprecated. Nowhere you can find this floppy disk. It is something similar like a small disk, very thin disk we have. It is around 3.4 MB of data is there, which is very less. So, the modern digital computers, they have deprecated, they completely removed these floppy drives. And the magnetic tapes, these are also not in use. We have CDs, compact disc, DVDs, digital versatile devices, and nowadays we are very much familiar with these Blu-ray discs, which stores large amount of data. So, this CD is around 600 MB to 700 MB, this DVD is around 2 GB I think, and this Blu-ray disc they will occupy more than this 2 GB. All these things are the input devices. And for example, if I am writing this, right, I am writing here, and this is particularly a input device which is called as the writing pad. I am using this writing pad to write something onto the computer to explain it clearly. So, this writing pad is also again a input device. Scanner. Scanner is a device which is used to scan the hard copies. You want to get the Xerox copy of a particular paper or a document, then you make use of this scanner. This is also an input device. Like that, we have n number of input devices. So, the main purpose of these input devices is, as I told, that they are going to accept the data and instructions from the outside world, and again they are going to convert it to a form that is computer can understand. So, your writing may not be understandable for the computer. You write CD. This CD is the human language. It is a natural language which is understandable by the programmer or the user, but this C and D are not understandable by the computers. They have separate format. They only understand zeros and ones. This is very important. So, the computers are going to make use of this particular language which is called as zeros and ones. The computers does not understand any other language, they only knows zeros and ones. That language we are calling it as the binary language. So, if somebody asks you what is the language that is understandable by the computer, or if somebody asks you what is the computer language, means it is nothing but the binary language. Why it is called as binary language? Means we have bi means 2. We have only 2 symbols to represent anything. Anything can be represented with these zeros and ones only. That is the reason why we are calling it as the binary language. So, the topic is clear, right? The computer language is otherwise called as the binary language. Why it is called as binary language? Means it has only 2 symbols to represent any type of data. You can represent anything by making use of a combination of zeros and ones. So, once you have the input device, when you give it to input to the computer has to convert that particular format into a format which is understandable by computer. That is done by the input devices only. And when the result is done, so whatever calculation, for example 10 and 20 is the understandable language by the humans. What computers will do is, this 10 will be converted to a binary format and this 20 will be converted into zeros and ones. Similarly, 10 will be converted into zeros and ones. Once the result is calculated, that means the 30, the result that is calculated will be in zeros and ones only, and again it has to convert this binary language to the decimal value. So, this is the purpose of the output devices. So, this 30 has to be displayed on the output device. So, conversions should be done by the devices, and of course, the computer will help it, but that's a different case we have. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Once we are done with this input unit, let us go with the output units. The name itself is saying that it is going to output. When you give some input and the computer processes it and it is going to give the result. As I told that everything the computer takes in will be in the form of zeros and ones only. When you want to display the result, you should have some provision to display it to the user in a format that is understandable by the user only. So, there should be some devices which help the users to get the result or to view the result from the computers. Those devices we are calling it as the output units. The output unit of a computer provides the information and results of a computation to the outside world. Examples of the output units are most frequently used or most commonly used output device is the monitor. We will see the result on the monitors. Those monitors are also called as VDU. VDU stands for Visual Display Unit. And sometimes you may get the output from the printers also. And when you want to play a song, you are going to listen to the music with the help of speakers. They also come under the category of these output units only. And the floppy disk drive, hard disk drive, HDD. This hard disk drive in short form we will call it as HDD. You can see somewhere else in the real life that you will come across this term HDD. HDD stands for hard disk drive. Magnetic tape drives is there. Nowadays we have the pen drives. These can be used both as input or output. Nothing wrong in it. Like that we have so many output devices which you can make use of it. So, we are done with the input and we are done with the output, and we are left with the processing unit, the central processing unit. The central processing unit consists of the storage and it also consists of ALU and it also consists of CU. But this ALU and CU, they are combinedly called as the CPU. You can put the storage outside of CPU, but you can also put it inside the CPU also, nothing wrong in it. You can combine these three and call it as a CPU, or you can combine these ALU and CU and call it as a CPU, nothing wrong in it. So, let us see what this CPU is, what this ALU is and what this control unit is, and then we will move to the storage. We have lot of things to discuss in the storage devices. Coming to the part of CPU, it is called as the central processing unit. Why it is called as central processing unit means this unit consists of the components that are required to perform the processing. You want to perform arithmetic processing, yes, you can do it by making use of ALU. You want to perform some logical operations, you can do it by making use of ALU. Since the ALU and CU are present inside the central processing unit, we are calling it as the central processing unit. In short form, we can call it as the CPU. And remember that the CPU is like the brain of human beings. So, the brain of the desktop systems or the computers is nothing but the CPU. Every instruction or every operation that you are going to perform on the computer will be given from the CPU only. That is the reason why. So, everything, for example, if you take our body, everything, every instruction that you get, for example, I want to raise my hand, I want to say hi, everything should be done from the brain only. In the similar way, any operation that you want to perform on the computer should be through the central processing unit only. Therefore, we call this CPU as the brain of the computer. So, it should have some functions, right. So, the CPU is capable of making some calculations. It takes all the decisions, any decision it is going to take with respect to this computer will be done in the CPU only, and every unit is controlled by this CPU only. For example, you want to control the printer, you want to control the scanner, you want to control the speakers, you want to control the mouse, everything will be done through this CPU only. So, it controls every unit of the computer, it controls input unit, it controls output unit, it controls arithmetic logic unit, it controls control unit, everything will be controlled here. Of course, the control unit itself is going to control all these things, but since we have this control unit present inside the CPU, we call it as the core of the computer. So, you have different processors like Intel 8088, you remember this term 8088, this is one processor, 80286, this is another microprocessor or microcontroller can be there, 80386 microprocessor, Celeron, Pentium Pro, Pentium 2, Pentium 4, dual core, AMD, these are all the different processors we have. The main part that is capable of doing these processing capabilities is nothing but the processor. Anything should be through this processor only. Without this processor, there is no computer. So, by learning this central processing unit, let us move towards the discussion on the arithmetic logical unit. The short form of this arithmetic logical unit is the ALU. The name itself is saying that it is going to perform the arithmetic operations and the logical operations. Any operation that is going to be performed on this ALU only. Arithmetic operations means nothing but addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modular division, all these things come under the category of arithmetic operations. Logical operations means or relational operations, anything. Relational means it is going to relate it, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, all these things are relations. Similarly, logical operations like AND, OR, XOR, NOT, all these operations are called as logical operations. These are called as relational operations, and these are arithmetic operations. So, all these operations are going to be performed by this arithmetic logic unit. And once you where from you are getting this inputs to this ALU means we are getting it from either the store or the input device. Once you get the data and the instructions from the store or the user, the processor will do the necessary processing and again store the results in the storage devices. This is the functionality of the arithmetic logic unit. A simple term you can remember is this unit is responsible for making the arithmetic and logical operations. Any operation, mathematics operation or any instruction is operations like arithmetic, logical, relational, everything will be performed on the ALU only. And the last part we are going to discuss under this CPU is the control unit. The name itself is giving the idea that it is going to control it. So, it is called as the nervous system. So, everything in our body will be controlled by the brain and through the nervous system. So, this control unit we are calling it as the nervous system of the computer. As the name indicates that this unit is going to control every other unit, input unit, output unit, arithmetic logical unit, everything is controlled by it. It controls how the input unit has to behave. It controls how much of data has to be taken from the memory and should be loaded to the processor. It controls how the results has to be processed. It controls how the results has to be stored on the primary memory or the secondary memory. Everything is controlled. That is the reason why we call it as the central nervous system of the computer. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So, we are done with the input unit, we are done with the output unit, we are done with the ALU and control unit. Now, we are going to discuss the storage part. The name itself is indicating that it is going to store the data or it is going to store the instructions. So, you might have some doubt that whether this storage is permanent or temporary. We have both types of storages. We have temporary storage, we have permanent storage also. That we will discuss. But the main purpose of the storage unit is to store or to hold the data and the instructions. And you have some intermediate results that are generated. Those are also being stored inside the storage units only. Why we are going to store this data? Why we are going to store these instructions? Means in general scenario or in the general life also we will store some particular important things. For example, if you want to store a textbook, you are going to store it by taking a hard copy and you are going to store it. The main reason for storage is for saving the data for later usage. Whenever you want to have the usage in the later cases, you are going to just retrieve it and then you have to repeat it. The same is the case with the storage also. We are going to make use of this storage unit to store the data or to store the instructions for later usage. The storage of the computer is broadly categorized into two categories. We have two categories of this storage. Very important topic. This is the primary storage and we have the second category as secondary storage. Now, we will see what is a primary storage, what are the characteristics of this primary storage and what are the various types of primary storage we have. Similarly, we will also discuss what is this secondary storage and what are the various examples we have under this secondary storage. All these things we will discuss. Coming to the primary storage, this forms the primary storage for the computer. You may not have the secondary storage. For example, if you want to buy a computer, you may not have the secondary storage. The computer will work fine without any secondary storage, but the computer will not work without the primary storage. When you buy a computer, it is mandatory that you should specify the primary storage. For example, 8 GB of RAM. We will see what RAM is later, but when you say that it is 8 GB of RAM, you are going to specify the size of the primary storage only. And while specifying these computers, you also say that 1 terabyte of HDD. HDD stands for hard disk drive. So, whenever you say this 1 terabyte of HDD, you can simply understand that you are going to specify the specifications for the secondary storage. So, primary storage is used by the processor. This is very important. and the secondary storage is used by the user as well as the processor also. So, you might have a doubt on this processor. A processor is nothing but a hardware device which is capable of performing lot of processing. So, every processing will be done inside the processor only. So, it is a chip, it looks like this, it is in a square or rectangle shape, it looks like a chip. Coming back to our discussion of primary storage, it stores and provides very fast access. As I told that this primary storage is being used by the processor only, it resides inside the motherboard. So, in the motherboard we have the processor, we have RAM, we have ROM, everything is present on the motherboard only. So, beside this processor, this is processor and this is RAM, let us assume. RAM is located nearer to this processor. So, any instruction, listen carefully, any instruction or any data that you are going to process will be first stored inside the RAM. Let us take the same example of adding two numbers 10, 20 and add is the instruction. These two are called the data elements and this is called the instruction. So, these 10 and 20 and this instruction is going to be stored in the secondary storage. Let us assume like that. Secondary storage example is the hard disk drive. You are going to store this 10 and 20 and add inside this hard disk drive which is present inside the CPU, somewhere far away from this RAM. So, let us assume that this is HDD. When you want to perform the addition operation, those are located in the hard disk drive. 10 will be retrieved and it is stored inside the RAM. Similarly, 20 will be retrieved and it is stored inside the RAM. And the addition instruction is retrieved and is stored inside the RAM. Once you have everything inside this RAM, the processing will be done by the processor. So, the point you have to remember here is the processor cannot access the hard disk drive directly. This access is not possible. The processor cannot process the data that is present inside the secondary memory. The processor is capable of accessing the primary storage only, this only it can access. That is the reason why we are going to store the data inside the RAM before making any operations. So, the simple point you have to remember here is the processor cannot access or it cannot make any modifications to the hard disk. Whatever it want to do, it is going to do it in the RAM only. For this purpose, you have to bring everything from the hard disk drive to the primary memory. Then only you can do the calculation. The processor can access it and it can do the calculations. Once the processing is completed, the result is again stored back inside the RAM only. As I told that the processor does not have the capability of accessing the hard disk drive, it has only access to the primary memory. So, it is going to store the result in the primary memory only. Then you have to give the programmer or the operating system, it will give some instructions to store the result from the primary memory to the hard disk. So, initially everything is brought from hard disk to primary memory, and once you have everything inside this primary memory, the second step is processing is done. Once processing is done, the result is again stored inside the RAM. This is third step. Once you have result inside the RAM, the instructions are given to store the result from the primary memory to the secondary memory. So, these four steps are going to be performed for each and every calculations you are going to do on the computer. This is the heart of any computer operation. So, you should know how it is going to happen, how the program is going to execute. Let us take a general example. I have a song called vanilla.mp3, let us say. This vanilla.mp3 is a music file with the extension .mp3, where this vanilla.mp3 is going to store is nothing but it is in the hard drive in some locations. And whenever I want to execute this, I want to listen to this vanilla.song, I simply go to this location. Because of the advancement of GUIs, I can simply move my mouse here and double click on it. Now, what happens when I double click on this vanilla.mp3 means this entire file which is located in the hard disk drive is loaded from that location to the CPU. So, in the CPU I know I have the processor and I know I have RAM. When I double click on this vanilla.mp3, this entire file will be taken from the HDD to RAM. It is loaded here. Once it is loaded from RAM, the processor is going to take it and it is going to play. Once everything is completed, if you have any results, it will be stored here, and from RAM everything will be pushed back again to the hard disk drive. So, these 4 steps are going to happen in every instruction. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So, this primary memory or the primary storage is very important. It is having very fast access and very less storage will be there, very less storage. You can understand from these specifications. RAM you are going to give it with 8 GB, but this hard disk drive you are going to give as 1 terabyte. So, 1024 gigabytes is equal to 1 terabyte. See the difference between the primary memory and the secondary memory. The main usage of this primary memory is it is going to hold the program being currently executed, and it is going to receive the receive the data from the input, and intermediate results and final results of the program are stored inside the primary memory. This is what we have discussed in this one. And the most important characteristic of this primary memory is it is temporary in nature. We can also say that it is volatile, very important. So, you might be asking a question that what is a temporary storage or what is a volatile memory? You can simply say that the primary storage is volatile in nature. You should know what this volatility is. Volatility means the data is lost when the computer is switched off. Let us take the same example. Vanilla.mp3, it is located in hard disk drive. When I want to execute this file, I just double click on it. Therefore, the vanilla.mp3 will be loaded into the RAM. Let us assume that the power has gone while you are playing the song. Once the power has been retrieved, when you turn on your computer, it won't play the vanilla song. It won't continue to play the vanilla song. Why? Because before the power is gone, the vanilla file is present inside the RAM, and from there the processor is playing it. But once the power is gone, everything that is present inside the RAM will be erased. The RAM becomes empty. That is the reason why we call that RAM as the volatile memory. Volatility means data is lost once the power is switched off. In order to retain the contents inside the RAM, you have to continuously give the power supply, which is not possible. But you can observe here that the hard disk drive, which comes under the secondary storage, even when the power is turned off and you have come back from the power failure stage, you can go to this folder and you can find this vanilla.mp3. It is permanent in nature. So, whatever you store inside the hard disk, they are permanent. Even though you turn off the computer, even though the power is gone, the contents will be remained as it is. Therefore, we call the hard disk drive or the secondary storage is permanent, whereas the primary storage is temporary in nature. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So, whenever you want to store the data permanently, the best option is you have to go for the secondary storage. Whenever you have the results that are stored inside the RAM, you can, whenever you are working on the Word document, you continuously press the Ctrl S. Ctrl S means you are going to, for example, whatever document you are writing, that is stored inside the RAM. That is stored inside the RAM. Whenever you press Ctrl plus S, save, these contents are going to be dumped onto the hard disk drive. We know very well about this HDD and RAM. HDD is permanent. So, when you press this Ctrl S, the contents are stored inside this HDD. Therefore, they become permanent. So, whenever you want to store the data permanently, it is better that you store the data inside the secondary memory, not in the primary memory. As I told that the primary memory is very less in size, but it is expensive. Expensive means when compared to that of the secondary storage. Less size means when compared to that of the secondary storage. We are going to compare both the primary and the secondary. And we told that the primary storage capacity is very limited in nature in every computer. Once we know about this primary memory, let us see what are the various categories of primary memory we have. We have only two categories of primary memory. One is called ROM and another one is called RAM. ROM stands for read only memory. So, it is an acronym. It is read only memory. By this term, you can easily understand that this is the memory which is capable of reading only. Reading means you are going to take the data from it. For example, you have a textbook which is already printed. Assume that no writing is allowed on this textbook. So, this textbook is capable, we can only read the contents from this textbook. So, they are allowing the read only property. You cannot write on it. Writing means you can write some additional content onto it. The same thing you can apply it here also. ROM means read only memory. So, whatever contents that are present inside the memory, those contents are being read by the user. Nothing can be written on the ROM. No write access. We call it as write access. Write. Similarly, we have other thing which is called as read access. So, write access and read access. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So, this read only memory, they are going to provide us with only the read access. We cannot write anything on it, but You might have a doubt, who is going to write the contents? Somebody has to write the contents in order to read the contents. So, the contents of the read only memory will be written at the time of manufacturing the ROM itself. So, there will be a company who is going to manufacture these ROMs, right? Those are going to write the contents inside this ROM, and you can never disturb those contents from those ROMs. That is the purpose of ROM. So, when you just turn on the computer, you can see a screen saying that Intel Pentium 4 or some screen will be, you will be getting, right, HP, something like that. Those type of contents will be read from the ROM only. So, they will, the HP manufacturer, what he will do is, or the Lenovo manufacturer, what he will do is, he will prepare a ROM and he will write the contents into the ROM at the time of manufacturing itself. And he is going to install it in your computer. So, once you switch on the computer, you boot the computer, that contents that are present inside that ROM will be read automatically. That is how it is designed. The main thing you have to understand here is the contents that are present inside the ROM can only be read, but it cannot be, you cannot, that means the user cannot write any contents onto it. But remember that there are some relaxations for this definition also. But basically you should remember that read only memory means the contents can be read only, it cannot be written. It is relatively small in nature, and ROM is always found on motherboards. As I told, that motherboard is a chip unit which embeds lot of processing, lot of components like processing unit, RAM will be there, ROM will be there. So, the ROM is always present on the motherboards, and ROM does not change. This is what the actual definition of ROM is. You can only read, but you cannot change it. It is also a permanent storage. So, when the computer is shut down, it remains the contents as it is. And it is possible to update the ROM, but it is only done rarely and at needed. We will see what this thing, how we can update it. So, the ROM, if ROM is damaged, the computer system simply cannot function. Even if you turn on your mobile, you will be getting the logo of your company, your mobile company like Poco or Realme, like that. So, you will get some graphics like this. So, all these things will be embedded inside the ROM. And coming to the types of ROM, we have the first ROM we are going to discuss is the masked ROM, mask programmable ROM, masked ROM, you can simply call it as. The short form is MROM. The contents of this MROM are going to be programmed at the factory itself, that means at the manufacturing unit itself they are going to write the contents. Therefore, we call it as the masked ROM, you cannot make the changes here. But there is a second category of ROM which is called as PROM. PROM stands for programmable ROM. So, this ROM allows us to program it, but remember that this programming is done only once. The manufacturer is going to give you some empty ROMs, and there are some special devices by which you can write your own content onto the ROM. But once you write it onto the ROM, that is closed. You can never rewrite it. That is called as the programmable ROM. It allows us to program it, but it is only done once. We have another category which is EPROM. EPROM stands for erasable programmable ROM. See the variants we have here. Erasable programmable ROM. I know what is ROM is. It is permanent storage. I know what programmable ROM is. It is a permanent storage where the user is allowed to write the contents but only once. And the variant here we have is erasable programmable RAM. That means you are having a ROM which is programmable and it is erasable also. It is not restricted that the programmer has to program it at the starting point only. Though you have written, for example, you bought a EPROM, you have written some contents into it. It is not over. If you want to change the contents, you can change it. That means you can erase the previous contents and you can dump the new contents also. This is the purpose of EPROM. So, for dumping the content, you require some special circuitry, and for erasing, you require some devices which support the ultraviolet rays. UV rays are supported. You require devices which support the UV rays for erasing the contents. Similarly, the last category we have is the electrically erasable PROM, which is EEPROM. I know what is ROM, I know what is programmable ROM, I know what is erasable programmable RAM, and what is this electrical means. Previously we used to have the ultraviolet light technology to erase the contents, but this time I am going to use the electrical circuits to erase the contents. That is the only difference we have. But all these three things, erasable and electrically erasable, EPROM and EEPROM, they are going to deviate from the definition of the ROM. You can observe here, ROM is read only memory, therefore you are going to read the contents only. But if you are going to change the contents, that is deviating from the original definition of the ROM, but they are still considered to be the ROMs itself. Clear? Is it clear? Okay. So, we are going to discuss the next topic, which is the RAM, which stands for random access memory. As we told that this is volatile in nature, that means it can hold the data until you provide the power to it. Once the power is gone, the contents are lost. And the RAM changes constantly as the system operates. So, when the system is operating, the RAM continuously changes its contents. That is the purpose of the RAM, to store the temporary results that is given by the operating system, or to give the inputs to the not the operating system, processor, to give the inputs to the processor or to store the results from the processor. You are going to have this RAM. So, the types of RAM we have are the SRAM, which stands for the static random access memory, and DRAM, which stands for the dynamic random access memory, and finally we have the cache memory. So, static random access memory means they make use of some transistor technology to represent a memory cell, and this is the most frequently or the most commonly used the RAM, SRAM. So, 8 GB of SRAM. We have other type of RAM which is called as the dynamic RAM, which makes use of some capacitors to refresh it every time. So, this is a different technology, but you just remember that DRAM is a dynamic random access memory which requires some capacitors to refresh the contents. And the last RAM we are going to discuss is the cache memory. It is the smallest and the fastest memory which stores the most frequently used data or instructions. For example, let us have 100 instructions in a program, and out of these 100 instructions, only 10 instructions are being used frequently. More and more times you are going to use these 10 instructions. So, instead of getting these 10 instructions from the hard disk drive all the time, which takes lot of time. What I can do is these 10 instructions I can retrieve it and I can store it in the cache memory. Once you have these 10 instructions inside the cache memory, whenever the processor wants an instruction from the hard disk drive, it won't directly go to the hard disk drive. It first checks it in the cache memory. Once the cache memory is having these instructions, it will retrieve from the cache memory itself. Therefore, it is saving lot of time. If the cache memory does not have these instructions, then it will go for the hard disk drive. So, frequently used instructions and data will be stored inside a memory which is called as the cache memory. So, this should be very speed, it should be very fast in nature. Why? Because processor is going to access it. And it is in general placed between the RAM and the processor. So, we have processor here, and beside this we have RAM and we have ROM somewhere else, and hard disk drive is somewhere like this, very far from the processor. This is the motherboard, and in between this processor and this RAM we have the cache memory. When the processor wants some data, it will first go and check the cache memory. If it is available, it will directly take it from the cache memory. If it is not available, then it will give an instruction to the hard disk drive, please bring some instructions to me. Therefore, that is brought from the RAM, and from RAM it is going to execute this processor instructions. Again, after processing, results will be stored in the RAM, again it will be stored in the hard disk drive. In the same case, when it is available with the cache, it will bring it from the cache, process it and store the result in the cache memory, and again store this result from the cache memory to the hard disk drive. So, the location of this processor or the cache memory is in between the processor and the RAM. So, that completes the discussion on the primary memory. Let us have a quick discussion on the secondary memory. As I told that the secondary storage is the permanent storage. Whatever contents you store inside this secondary storage, they are permanent in nature. They are not gone even though you remove the power. So, they can be used as archives. It is used to store the programs, documents, databases, etc. on the permanent basis. And as I told that whatever programs you are going to store, you store it in this secondary storage, and once you run it, once you want to run those programs, you get it from the secondary memory to the primary memory, and whatever results you have from the primary memory, you again throw back to the secondary memory for the permanent storage. And the main characteristic of this secondary memory is they are slower than the primary memory. When compared to that of RAM and ROM, they are slower, and they are cheaper also. You get 1 terabyte of memory for just 6 to 7,000, and but 8 GB of RAM itself costs 3 to 4,000. So, the secondary memory are cheaper in nature, but they are slower in operation. Examples of secondary memory are, we have hard disk, CD, DVD, flash memory. Flash memory is nothing but pen drive, etc. Like that, we have different types of memories. That completes the complete discussion on the block diagram. The block diagram consists of the input unit, similarly it consists of the output unit, and the CPU, which consists of ALU and CU. Apart from this, we have storage also. We have seen everything from input, output, types of storages, ALU and CU. So, that completes the complete discussion on the entire block diagram of the modern digital computers. In this session, we have discussed, let us have a recap. In this session, we have discussed the types of computers based upon the computational capability, like the supercomputers, mainframes, mini computers, microcomputers, workstations. Like that, we have seen different categories, And then we have entered into the block diagram of the digital computers, modern digital computers, where we have discussed the various input units, we have various output units, what is the purpose of the ALU, what is the purpose of CU. Control unit is called the central nervous system, where the entire CPU acts like a brain for the computer. And what are the storage categories we have? The primary and the secondary. Primary is volatile, secondary is permanent. What are the various categories of primary memory? RAM and ROM. What are the various categories of ROM? Programmable ROM, electrical erasable programmable ROM, electrically erasable programmable ROM, masked ROM. Like that we have different categories. Similarly, we have seen the categories of RAM also, which is the static RAM and the dynamic RAM. Other than these two RAMs, we have other RAM which is called as cache memory, which always stores the frequently accessed instructions. And the last one we have discussed is the secondary storage, where lot of examples like the hard disk drive, flash memory, pen drive, CD, DVD, everything can be given, and it is permanent in nature. Whenever you want to store the contents on a permanent basis, you have to go for the secondary storage only. So that's all for today's session. Thank you.